Thank you, everybody, so much for being at this session today. I am quite excited for this session, and it seems that many of you were quite excited as well. We had so many signups, close to 200 people for this session today, and I really sense that it is such a timely session, and it really reflects so many needs that are going on right now with people who have maybe had family members get caught up in different things, and so we're really glad you're here. First off, just keep in mind that you can submit your questions via the Q&A box at any time today, and they will be answered after Bill's presentation. We want this to be a really engaging presentation, and so we're really happy to answer any questions you may have, and we'll try to get through as many as we can at the end of the session today. Just a little bit about the speaker, Bill Goldberg, LCSW, PSYA. He's a clinical social worker and a psychoanalyst. He has over 40 years of experience working with former cult members. He and his wife, Lorna, have actually led a support group for former cult members that is one of the longest running of its kind. I think it's one of the oldest in the world, actually. Correct me if I'm wrong on that, Bill, over 40 years. He retired from Rockland County, New York Department of Mental Health. He's directed several programs and clinics. He's currently an adjunct professor in social work in the science departments of Dominican College, and he is on the faculty of the Institute for Psychoanalytic Studies. He's published numerous articles and has spoken at many of ICSA conferences and events. He also has been a co-editor for ICSA's Cult Recovery, a clinician's guide to working with former members and their families. And there is a correction to the bio that was on the flyer. The book has actually been published. It is ready to go and it is available to you. I'll throw a link in the comments section so that you can check it out. So thank you so much again for being here today, everybody. And thank you so much, Bill, for presenting on this topic. The title for today's lecture is Conversation, Psychosocial Aspects of Belief in Conspiracy Theories. One more point to make, if you are here for CE credits today, we ask that you remain on for the entirety of the lecture segment of this presentation so that we have a record of your attendance. And after the interview portion, you will be asked to fill out a survey at the end of the webinar today. Once you submit that survey, I will then issue you your CE certificate. So thank you very much. With that being said, Bill, I'll go ahead and turn it over to you. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ashlyn. I remember exactly where I was on campus at Rutgers when I read in the Daily Targum that there was the theory that Paul McCartney was dead. When I saw the headline, I responded with my usual skepticism. However, as I read the voluminous evidence, my mind shifted as I began to consider the very real possibility that Paul had indeed died. The story was that he had been killed in a car crash and that the corporate suits of Apple Records withheld that information from the world in order to continue to capitalize on the band. They had secretly replaced him with the winner of a Paul McCartney lookalike contest. However, the Beatles, ever loyal to their fans, left clues to allow the enlightened few to recognize the hoax. There were many secret clues. Some were in the lyrics of Beatles songs. You see, he blew his mind out in a car. He hadn't noticed that the lights had changed. A crowd of people gathered round. They'd seen his face before. Other clues were on the album cover photographs. On the iconic Abbey Road cover, Paul was barefoot. The procession of his bandmates could be seen as a representation of pallbearers. His uniform on the Sgt. Pepper's cover had the initials of the Ontario Police Department. The explanation was that OPD was police jargon for officially pronounced dead. After Paul's death, The Beatles changed their name to Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. The name of the McCartney lookalike was Billy Shears. If you played a part of their song Revolution 9 backwards, it seemed to say, "Turn me on, dead man." There were 50 other clues, none of which were definitive, but putting them all together made the theory of a hoax plausible. It had the elements of a good conspiracy theory. It was something meaningful. Boomers in my age bracket believed that there never was and never will be a band that comes close to the Beatles' greatness. It fit our narrative of how powerful people were attempting to manipulate us. After all, the establishment was blatantly lying to us about Vietnam, the most crucial issue to us. Why wouldn't they lie to us about the second most important issue in our lives, the Beatles? It had cartoon-like powerful villains against whom we could join with others to fight with our consciously idealistic but unconsciously hostile thought-stopping cliches. Hey, hey, LBJ, how many kids did you kill today? And we possessed the secret esoteric knowledge that made us superior to the masses of people who were just so sheep-like that they couldn't see the signs. Now, I'm aware that there's a tremendous difference in degree and outcome between this example and the grotesque claims and results of the modern day conspiracy theorists. To my knowledge, no one has tried to run a car off the road or killed someone because of the Paul is dead rumor. No one has shot a rifle in a pizza restaurant, and no one has claimed that the Apple executives are kidnapping children and drinking their blood. No believer in the Paul is dead rumor was involved in an armed standoff with law enforcement, and they never forced their way into Congress in an attempt to overturn the government. However, my point is that the dynamics of conspiracy theories are dynamics that we all can relate to. I want to take a few moments now to mention some of the conspiracy theories that are presently believed by a significant number of our fellow citizens. The Earth is really flat, but scientists are promulgating the myth that it's round for sinister reasons. The Sandy Hook and other massacre victims and their families are crisis actors who've been recruited to fabricate falsehoods for the ultimate purpose of confiscating everyone's firearms. Similarly, George Floyd was a crisis actor, as are the doctors and COVID patients portrayed in the mainstream media. COVID vaccinations will implant microchip tracking devices into your arm. Masks will not prevent the spread of COVID. Indeed, they are designed to give you COVID. Windmills give you cancer. The overflow tents set up near hospitals are actually being used to smuggle children out of the country to be harvested for their body fluids, which are drunk by the conspirators for their own vitality. George Soros controls the media and financial institutions. Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Georgia congresswoman who espouses many conspiracy theories and who was stripped of her committee assignments on February 4th, has said that the California wildfires were started by space lasers funded by the Rothschilds, like Soros, a favorite Jewish target of the anti-Semitic right. Congresswoman Greene's conspiracies are an update of ancient conspiracy theories that expose a Jewish plot to undermine Christianity. Before George Soros, it was the Rothschilds who controlled financial institutions and the media for the purpose of destroying Christianity. In Tsarist Russia, it was the elders of Zion. In medieval times, the plotters were sinister Jews who used the blood of Christian children when baking matzahs. In Civilization and Its Discontents, Freud wrote that it is always possible to bind together a considerable number of people in love, so long as there are other people left over to receive the manifestations of their aggressiveness. Voltaire wrote, "If you believe absurdities, you can commit atrocities." One prominent luminary publicly accused hospitals of inflating the number of COVID-19 deaths in order to increase insurance payments. In other words, widespread insurance fraud and medical malpractice are being committed regularly by hospitals and their staffs on a routine basis in the United States, and nobody is doing anything about it. That last assertion was fabricated by none other than the ex-president of the United States at a campaign rally last October. You have undoubtedly heard about the followers of QAnon. They believe that a secret government official, in partnership with the ex-president, sends messages called crumbs dropped by Mr. Trump in his public speeches. According to this conspiracy theory, the former president is secretly working to foil a child trafficking ring consisting of the media, Hollywood celebrities, and prominent Democrats. QAnon offers the delusion of a great awakening in which the elites will be routed and the truth will be revealed. Those who recognize the crumbs will be the vanguard of this great awakening. As you know, QAnon followers were one of the leading groups involved in the attempted takeover of Congress on January 6th. Ashley Babbitt, the woman who was killed by a Capitol police officer that day as she was breaking into the House chamber, was a QAnon follower. She wrote on Twitter the day before her death that the storm is here, referring to a QAnon meme that stemmed from a supposed crumb from then President Trump when he said at a news event that year that the storm is coming. When he was asked what that meant, he replied, "You'll see." QAnon members believed that the storm was going to be the day that President Trump would finally arrest the Democratic political leaders, Hollywood figures, and media leaders engaged in the pedophile ring. On that day, these traitors would be detained, marched through the streets, and publicly executed. Ms. Babbitt wrote that day before her death, "They can try and try and try, but the storm is here, and it is descending upon DC in less than 24 hours, dark to light," which is another QAnon meme. Babbitt's biography indicates that she was an Air Force veteran who became involved in QAnon after her business began to fail. She put the blame for this failure on minority groups who she believed were being given unfair advantages. She was aggrieved, and it appears that QAnon gave her an explanation for her grievances. Since the pandemic began, I've been contacted by 6 distraught families with members who have either dropped out of school, abandoned their children, or have become obsessed with QAnon conspiracy theories to the exclusion of all other interests and activities. Truth is restricted. It's bounded by facts. Conspiracy theories have no such boundaries. If you can dream it up, if it fits with your preconceived notions about the world, and if you can discover patterns, no matter how unrelated and no matter how absurd, it's true. If the President of the United States, a trusted authority figure, is validating the rumor, it becomes even more undeniable. Under the right set of circumstances, these discoveries can cross over from possibly true to probably true to definitely true. To anyone who disputes this truth is a snowflake or a sheep or a pedophile or a socialist or a traitor or a Satanist or a member of the Elders of Zion. QAnon and other conspiracy promoting organizations has systematically eroded its followers' confidence in reliable sources, such as journalists, the enemies of the people, the government, the deep state, fact checkers, the lame street media, and scientists. There are facts, and then equally compelling, there are alternative facts. Some believers in conspiracy theories confuse coincidence with causality. 5G cellular network technology was introduced around the same time as the reports of COVID. Believers in this conspiracy point to the fact that there is an overlap that can be seen when one compares a map of 5G technology with a map of COVID cases. Of course, the overlap can be explained by the fact that both 5G technology and COVID cases are more concentrated in urban areas. The actors John Cusack and Woody Harrelson, among others, have been spreaders of the belief that the virus is caused by 5G technology. Last September, a Republican congressional candidate, Deanna Lorraine, discerned a secret plot. She wrote on Twitter, quote, "I find it interesting how the show The Masked Singer hit America in January 2019, a little over a year before they started forcing us all into wearing masks. It's almost like they were beginning to condition the public that masks were normal and cool." Rene Descartes wrote, "I think, therefore I am." Conspiracy theorists, in effect, say, "I can think it, therefore it is." The saying goes, "Seeing is believing." Perhaps it should be modified to read, "Believing is seeing." In a 2020 survey of over 4,000 Americans, 16% of those who did not rate QAnon favorably nonetheless found at least one of the QAnon fantastic claims to be plausible. Perhaps more to the point, a recent NPR poll found that 17% of Americans absolutely believed that a group of Satan-worshiping elites who run a child sex ring is trying to control our politics and the media. 17%. Another 37% responded that they were not sure whether this statement was factual. I would like to delineate these statistics another way. 54% of the respondents either accepted that statement as true or believe that it's within the realm of possibility. Let that one sink in for a moment. Conspiracy theorists develop a science fiction force field around themselves, and attempts to penetrate that shield only contribute to the force and make it stronger. The December 19th, 2020 issue of the New York Times quotes an anti-vaxxer. There is no, quote, evidence that there's a microchip in COVID inoculations or that there's something nefarious about the whole thing, but I have a gut check about it all. And the government pushing it. And they're finding all these popular people that take the vaccine, and it's weird. Why are they pushing it so hard? I want to look at the types of people who would be more prone to accepting conspiracy theories. Personality types who are probably more prone to believe conspiracy theories are people who collect injustices, who are impulsive, and who are prone to seeing patterns where there are none. There is also an underlying paranoid aspect of their personalities. As appears to have been the case with Ashley Babbitt, some accept conspiracy theories as a balm for deep grievance, an internal narrative that permits them to make sense of a world that seems senseless and often unfair. A study published in the Journal of Personality described a battery of standardized personality profiles given to 2,000 adults. The study measured personality characteristics and their correlation with beliefs in conspiracy theories. The researchers report no correlation to levels of anger, sincerity, or self-esteem. They did, however, find a correlation with self-centeredness, entitlement, impulsivity, cold-heartedness, and elevated levels of anxiety and depression. As with Babbitt, perhaps there is a personal expectation of success and a readiness to blame others, particularly minorities, when this success is not achieved. Also, escape into conspiracy theories can become a defense against the uncomfortable emotions of anxiety and depression, common feelings experienced during this time of COVID and the lockdown. On February 10th, the Washington Post published the results of a survey which found that close to 60% of the rioters charged in the January 6th insurrection had some kind of major financial problems. Either they declared bankruptcy, owed the IRS money, or had major debts. Again, personal problems and failures could be explained and discharged by belief in a conspiracy. We like to think that we're rational and that the conspiracy theorists aren't. So let me propose that we rational people can have our emotional, non-rational sides too. For example, how many of you would be willing to take a photograph of the people you love and poke out their eyes with a pencil? Or contemplate this unlikely scenario. Suppose someone you love needs a heart transplant, and you are told that there are two possible donors. One heart has a slightly better prognosis, but there is a drawback. It's the heart of a serial killer. Would that even be a small part of the equation as you're contemplating which heart to choose? About 20 years ago, I traveled to Israel. At that time, I had a colleague and friend named Patty who had terminal cancer. I consider myself to be a generally rational person who tries not to engage in magical thinking. However, when I visited the Western Wall, I placed a petition in the cracks, requesting that God heal her. I wrote the same petition on a bill that I dropped into the donations jar at Hadassah Hospital in Jerusalem. Furthermore, full disclosure, since Patty was Catholic, I wrote the same petition on a bill that I dropped into the donation slot at the Church of the Nativity in Bethlehem. Do I think that my acts were superstitious? Yes. Do I think that they were examples of magical thinking? Yes. Do I think that the only thing they accomplished was to give me a false sense of hope in my ability to change fate? Yes. Would I do them again in a similar set of circumstances? Hell yes. One of the facts about how we humans think is that we all unconsciously look for patterns to make sense of our random universe. Indeed, that's a factor that therapists consider in our work with our clients. That is, we note their characterological ways of dealing with issues and problems in their lives. When we notice these patterns, so often driven by unconscious assumptions, we sometimes point them out to clients in order to help them to recognize their repetitive behavior. As therapists, our recognition of patterns helps us in our work. However, sometimes all of us feel that patterns are significant, even when those patterns are not accurate indications of truth. Take, for example, this question. Emily's father has 3 daughters. The first is named April, the second is named May. What's the third one's name? I'm going to repeat the question. Emily's father has 3 daughters. The first is named April, the second is named May. What is the third one's name? Of course, the answer is Emily. But many of us, detecting a pattern in the girls' names, will make a quick assumption that bypasses our logic and our conscious reasoning. Here's another question. Do you think there were more murders last year in Detroit or in Michigan? I am not suggesting that we are all irrational or that all of us would fall down the rabbit hole of conspiracy theorists. There's a difference in degree, and that difference has significance. But it's a fact that we look for comfort of trying to make sense out of a capricious and unfair world in order to safely conduct ourselves. There's a difference between avoiding a dark alley late at night and never leaving the confines of our home because there are malevolent people on the outside. But both actions stem from the same desire to avoid situations in which we would be placed in harm's way. Of course, the degree of protection that we offer ourselves is driven by our fantasies and desires about what might happen to us. Conspiracy theories combine a connect-the-dot game with an adventure hunt. They also tap into unconscious desires to return to a primitive, childlike state in which we can feel secure and protected by an omnipotent, powerful parental object. That parental object watches out for us, but sometimes tells us to do things for our own good that don't make sense. Parents tell their children to go to bed when they're not tired and to get up when they want to stay asleep. They make their children get shots that hurt and tell them that it's good for them. They make them eat yucky vegetables and tell them not to eat good tasting candy. Those acts don't make sense, but children learn to accept them because they come to believe that their parents know what's best for them, even if they don't understand it. As a response to the pandemic, many people have had to tolerate elevated levels of anxiety and depression. For some, conspiracy theories have become a means of escape from an isolated and fearful pandemic world. Conspiracy theorists can feel less isolated through connection with a community on the internet. In this manner, they may be regressing to Klein's paranoid schizoid position. The world becomes black and white, consisting of heroes and demons. Their unconscious sexual fantasies can be discharged by combating pedophiles who are preying on helpless children. Their unconscious aggressive fantasies can be unleashed and discharged by imagining themselves as part of a crusading army, and through transference, they can imagine Donald Trump to be a protective, omnipotent general. In group psychology and the analysis of the ego, Freud described the powerful relationship between the charismatic leader and the group members who experience the leader as a new father figure with whom they identify. Freud theorized that through identification with the leader, the followers' superegos could be changed. Mutual identification of all the followers stemming from idealization of the leader, contributes to the feeling of the followers' moral responsibility, contributes to the freeing of the followers' moral responsibility from their actions which they take at the behest of the leader. Freud pointed to Le Bon when he observed that people in groups will become involved in activities that they would feel constrained against doing when acting alone. This is the contagion of the crowd. We witness an example of the contagion of the crowd on January 6th. In addition to primitive unconscious motivations for believing in conspiracy theories, we must recognize the manipulative aspects of the information age in which we live. Our instincts and defenses are manipulated by groups that attempt to influence us. Mao, in refining the techniques of thought reform or brainwashing, developed a systemic approach that attacked the victim's sense of self. In order to be reborn into Maoism, the truths that the victim relied upon to make sense of the world needed to be abolished and replaced by a new paradigm. I don't have time today to describe the dynamics of brainwashing, but I'll mention a few of the components of this manipulation as they're delineated by Robert J. Lifton in his book, Thought Reform and the Psychology of Totalism. I know that anyone listening who has an interest in this topic is very familiar with Lifton. One of Lifton's components is milieu control, a domination of all communication in the individual's environment. Families of conspiracy theorists will describe a deconfecting of all other interests in the individual's life. People who have accepted the conspiracy theory will spend uninterrupted hours and even days on the internet watching videos and reading tracts. All other communications and relationships become irrelevant and insignificant. A second component is doctrine over person. Doubts or recognition of the internal inconsistencies of the conspiracy theories are defined as examples of deficiency in the minds of the doubter or of unenlightened thinking. A third component is dispensing of existence. The only individuals who have a right to be considered in the true believer's world are other conspiracy theorists. Everyone who has a different perspective is dismissed as a sheep, a snowflake, an enabler of pedophilia, unenlightened and foolish. How do we, as helping people, approach someone who is a victim of this narrow consciousness? I give you my thoughts here with humility, recognizing that the exit-counselors or interventionists in our community are the real experts in how to help someone who is in a rabbit hole of false beliefs. I continue to learn from them, and you should too. But having said that, I do have some thoughts on the matter. First, recognize that a direct assault on their facts, an approach we might use with other individuals, will not usually be helpful in this scenario. In his article, An Interpretation of Transference, Jonathan Lear points out that all of us create our own polis. The polis is the Greek city-state. And we live in that polis. Our polis, or worldview, gives us comfort in that it's understandable to us, even though the outside world may not accept or understand our individual polis. Someone from outside the conspiracy theorist polis who is trying to communicate with him or her is unconsciously seen as a barbarian whose words are ba, ba, ba. When we approach a conspiracy theorist with our reality-based arguments, we are likely to be dismissed by the client. The top fencer in the world does not fear the second best fencer in the world the most. He or she is more fearful of the unranked person who doesn't abide by the rules of sportsmanship or safety. Similarly, it's more satisfying for all of us to have a discussion with someone who recognizes the importance of logic, reasonableness, and acknowledgement when another person makes a valid point. Those qualities are not valued by the conspiracy theorist who looks for certainty and comfort, not for logic. Therefore, conspiracy theorists need to be approached with the recognition of common ground, not with an assault on their facts. Statements like, "You are someone who seeks truth," or "I can see how much you want to protect children from being exploited," or "It's upsetting to you that your family doesn't understand how important QAnon is to you, and that conflict distresses you and negatively affects your life," are more likely to build common ground. It's been my observation from my work with numerous former cult members that their defensive clutching of the cult's ideology was a reaction to their unconscious doubts about the cult and its doctrine. Almost universally in therapy, once they're out, they acknowledge that they had tremendous doubts while they were in the cult, and they fought to keep those doubts from coming to consciousness. I have to recognize here that I see a skewed sampling of former cult members. Those who never leave the cults, or those who are not struggling with these issues, don't seek therapy with me. Nonetheless, it's a fact that most former cult members whom I've seen can recall times when they doubted the doctrine. They learned to squelch those doubts with prayer, chanting, meditation, or thought-stopping cliches. Therefore, I might ask a conspiracy theorist how their life has changed and whether they felt happier when they were involved with their work, their studies, and their family. What did they have to give up in order to embrace the conspiracy theory? I try to bring the client's unconscious doubts to consciousness, even for a moment. I ask questions, many of which I learned from Steve Hassan's books. I'm confused. You tell me that Donald Trump is going to coordinate a wholesale arrest of the liberal pedophiles and human traffickers. But why do you think he didn't act when he was in office and had power, when you tell me that he knew exactly what was going on and had all the proof he needed? If the COVID pandemic is a hoax, how do you account for the number of people in every country in the world who are dying? Is it possible that there could be another explanation than the ones you're given? When I respectfully raise these questions, which again are the unconscious questions that I believe the client has but is repressing, I'm less interested in the answers they give than in the act for a moment of having them consider my confusion. And that's not different from what we do in therapy all the time, when we offer our clients the possibility of a different interpretation of the world than what they have used all their lives. Timing is everything, but we do not know what unconscious doubts the conspiracy theorist is wrestling with, so we don't know when something we ask will be accepted by the client. Of course, the exit counselors in our community will tell you that listening to the testimony of former members of a cult can be a powerful tool in helping people to reconsider their cult membership. Similarly, to a group of people who put emphasis on not blindly following false leaders, when they hear about the journey of other people who once held similar beliefs to the ones they've adopted, these testimonies can be powerful in getting them to reconsider how they arrived at their positions. There are several websites with testimonials from former QAnon believers, and they can be Googled. Several years ago, I spoke to a cult member of a group which claimed that their leader, a particularly cruel and sociopathic individual, was a reincarnation of Jesus of Nazareth. After a lengthy conversation, she gave me a gift that she told me the new Messiah wanted me to have, and I forgot about our conversation. 2 years later, she called me to tell me that she had left the cult. She said that she couldn't get out of her mind a question that I had asked her. I had said to her, Jesus was a humble man. Is your Messiah a humble man? Pondering that question for 2 years led to her decision to leave, and she wanted to thank me. My point in this anecdote is not that I was particularly brilliant in asking that question. I had no idea that it would affect her so much. My point is that she was ready to have that question brought to her consciousness, and out of pure luck, I happened to ask it at the right time. Now we've reached the end of the recording, so we'll be going live for questions and comments in just a moment. But before I ask for questions and comments, while the video is still on, I do want to state unequivocally and for the record that there never has been and never will be a band that comes close to the greatness of the Beatles.